Hey all, welcome back to the channel. Brendan here, aka Cliff Jumper, and we're back on the Corrado project today because rats. Yes. For those who might not be familiar, I live in the East County of San Diego in a semi-rural region. Well, very rural. We live in between a ranch and another ranch and anyway. There are rats, there are rodents, and for whatever reason, they really like chewing on the wiring of my car. And I'm sure many of you have home remedies for dealing with rodents that do stuff like this. So feel free to leave some comments about what has worked for you. I've tried a variety of methods to keep them away, but they keep coming back. This was a brand new sensor not very long ago that I think within the last year installed this. Now I've already started trying to do a repair with this, tinning the wires, and I will aim to repair it rather than replace it. I do have a replacement also that I can pop in there, but yeah, we're gonna see if we can just fix this thing. So I gotta pop out the other end of it, and then we'll get to it. And this, of course, is the sensor that is behind the block. So I've got to make a choice about whether I want to remove all this superchargery stuff to get down in there, or if I can go in from this side and reach under and get to where the bolt is. So we'll see if we can get to that.
5 minutes later.
So I was able to reach down behind and unbolt it. So here is the very nice, shiny, brand new sensor. Look how new it is. I mean, there's no corrosion. The car's barely been on the road, but rat. So let's see if we can repair this, pop it back in, and make sure we put a little bit of, you know what I've discovered is apparently the sheathing that they used on this from the factory is biodegradable, and that is made of soy, and that attracts rodents. So maybe if I spray it with some stuff they don't like, or wrap it with cloth factory cable wrap that they don't like, that might help. So let's fix this. Well, one nice thing about living in San Diego is you can do wiring repair outdoors just about any time of the year. So we've got our, I've already prepared one half of the harness and stripped the wires back, tinned them. We do need to get some heat shrink ready to slide onto each of these individual threads. This is unprepared. This is still just the chewed through side. So I'm going to start by stripping off the rubber insulation on the outside with an X-Acto knife. I don't trust that my regular automatic wire strippers will work as nicely with rat chewed wires. Call me crazy, but I'm just going to do it gently. Okay, so rat chewed nastiness is off. I'm going to separate the ground wire, which has a mild twist to it. I'm going to keep that twist and tin it separately. And then we have 2 more wires for signal. You see at the end of each of these, there's some rat chewed nastiness, so yeah. I'm going to trim it back to where all the mangled stuff is no longer present. Now for those of you, again, this is aimed at rookie mechanics and rookie techies. So if you're not familiar with tinning, you're using flux to pre-treat the wires that you're going to solder, adding just a little bit of solder into the wires themselves so that it'll stick better when you go to solder it to something else. Okay, so these wires are tinned now. Let them cool down. While they're cooling, I'm gonna cut some short lengths of heat shrink cable. I've already got a long length of heat shrink on the outer sheath to be able to lay over the whole thing once we put it together. And, yeah. So we need 2, really, because the ground doesn't matter if it is heat shrink. It's gonna connect with the shield wrapping anyway. One trick to keep your heat shrink from prematurely shrinking is you want to use a pair of forceps like this as a heat sink. It pulls heat away from this main section of wire while you're soldering it to something else. So I can position this with my little handy grabby tool here. So holding this. Got the forceps as a heat sink, line up the cables, and then a quick touch. And I think I moved them a little too much, so, but there we go. Okay. Give it a moment for that to cool, and then I can remove the forceps, slide the heat shrink over it, and that will be good to go in place. And generally use the edge of the soldering iron to constrict your heat shrink. So we're going to use the grabby tool here to hold the one side. We've got all these tinned. On the other side, I've got the heat shrink already in place, and we're going to use the forceps here as a heat sink to keep the heat shrink from shrinking when we actually solder. So we'll just put that on like that. That will draw the heat away from that section of the cable and allow us to, and that'll allow us to solder it without melting the heat shrink prematurely. So we just line that up. There we go. Let that cool for just a few moments so that when I release the forceps, the heat doesn't immediately go into the heat shrink and shrink that. Now we can slide the heat shrink up over the gap. And we just use the side of the soldering iron to constrict the heat shrink. And that's one done. Let's get the others. So now we got the 3 connections made, and I'm going to want to tuck them, and they will want to twist just a little bit so that they are the proper length. There's a little bit of shielding around them, and we will slide the exterior heat shrink up around this whole kit and caboodle. Now I can probably start the process with this, but this would be better with a heat gun because it is a larger section of heat shrink. So let's go ahead and grab a heat gun. That'll make short work of this. We'll let that cool off for a few moments here, and then we are going to hit this with the factory cloth wrap just to give it an extra layer of protection and keep, hopefully maybe dissuade some rodents from wanting to chew all that up again. So now that that's done, let's put it back in the car and see if it turns on. A VR6 Corrado won't start if the knock sensor cable is disconnected. So that's one of those fun things. So if we put it in and it starts, then we know we're in good shape. The sensor goes down underneath the exhaust manifold on the back side of the block. So we have to do this blind, just the way that we put it in. We're gonna reach down from underneath and try to thread it by hand and then tighten it. So hopefully that'll go all right. Okay, I found the hole where it goes. That's great. It's threading in. That's helpful. All right. Tightened in place. And I am going to want to route this in such a way that it's not going to get caught in a belt or anything of the such. And maybe not in a place where rats are going to want to eat it. Not near any places a rat looks like it would run. I think we're in okay shape. So let's see if she starts now. All right. All right. So mischief managed as far as the knock sensor cable goes. So yay.
And on that terrible disappointment, it's time to say goodbye. We'll be back.